And now you can possibly hear the applause on the floor. I think the applause is for the former mayor of San Francisco, George Christopher, who was a Rockefeller delegate, who ran on the Rockefeller ticket and who is now on the podium shaking hands and is now going to make a speech. The former mayor of San Francisco, George Christopher.
Well, after that beautiful introduction, I'm lost for words for the first time in many, many years. My fellow Americans and fellow Republicans, I indeed want to thank Mrs. Patricia Hitt and National Chairman Miller and the committee for this presentation and the words which have filled me with a deep sense of humility. And I'm honored, too, to have this opportunity of addressing the distinguished delegates of this great Republican National Convention. First, I, too, want to join in extending a most cordial welcome to all of you and to thank you for accepting our invitation to meet in our city. It was my pleasure to have this same privilege in 1956 when I was serving then as mayor of San Francisco. And may I remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that that convention was eminently successful. I am confident that as we nominated the President of the United States from this rostrum in 1956, we shall do so again in this year of 1964. If, however, we remain steadfast to our time-honored Republican principles, this is an occasion for all Americans, regardless of party, to refresh their memories and to take inventory of the events that have transpired in the last 4 years. Let us all refresh our memories that 4 years ago, the opposition party was limitless in its promises to the American people. They would reach the millennium in job opportunities, in fiscal responsibility, in our international relations. Indeed, name the problem, and a press agent's miraculous solution was readily available. And now, 4 years later, our nation is beset with uncertainty and confusion, both at home and abroad. The shooting wars that General Eisenhower resolved by his mission to Korea have been set aflame again, more dispersed and more destructive than ever before. These events, my friends, have not only taxed our resources in assuring the security of America, but have provoked a dubious regard of our policies amongst our political allies as well. In the campaign of 1960, the opposition party, with rampant political abandon, charged deficiencies in every conceivable American effort. Whether it involved our missile program, our international prestige, our domestic economy, our job potential, our international trade and credit, or any subject that might entice another stray vote, the world was told that America was woefully inadequate. Where are we now? Look at our debt, a new frontier indeed. Look at our nation's current budget, a new frontier in public spending indeed. In 1960, the opposition party told the world that 17 million Americans were going to bed hungry every night. And now, 4 years later, the incumbent president tells the world there are 35 million Americans living in poverty. I will not question the validity of these figures. In fact, I think we must thank the incumbent administration for reminding us of a situation which permits some comparisons. Because if 17 million Americans were living in poverty 4 years ago, and if we have 35 million Americans living in poverty today, then we must ask this simple question: Who, I ask, who has been minding the store in the past 4 years? And bear in mind, too, that this self-confessed march backward has transpired under an administration with a unique advantage of a 2-to-1 majority in the Congress. How disconcerting it is for the American people to watch this administration frantically looking for the trouble their mismanagement has created, finding the malady spreading everywhere, diagnosing it wrongly, and applying remedies that are worse than the disease itself. I emphatically question the political philosophy, my friends, of an administration that rocks the ship of state and then embarks on a program of convincing everyone that there is a storm at sea which only their captaincy can control. Yes, there are too many unemployed people in America today, almost 5 million of them. And yes, indeed, there are too many American families suffering today from the antics of economic agnostics who are blindly struggling in a whirlpool of artificial theories and improvident management of our country's resources. All of the inequities, all the unemployment, all the poverty, all the deprivation that exists today will remain with us as long as we are led by people who are not learned and dedicated practitioners of our free enterprise system. 4 years ago, our government has been misdirected by impractical economic theorists who persist in trying to spend their way to fiscal solvency. They cannot seem to comprehend the fallacy of these policies which countermand every recognized and proven economic precept in the history of free civilization. Ask any housewife, ask any average white-collar worker, ask any shop worker, ask any senior citizen living on their retirement income, ask anyone who depends on a weekly paycheck for their sustenance what has been the effect in their household as a result of the unsound, artificially inspired inflationary spiral that has consistently detracted from the buying power of their incomes. We must not permit this incompetence to further embalm the traditional progressive spirit of America. I do not know how much we may have saved, my friends, how much we may have saved by turning out the lights in the White House. Instead, it occurs to me that America's efforts might be more productive if we placed in the White House a new, vibrant, high-voltage Republican generator, a Republican generator to light up the White House once again in its fullest glory and highest efficiency, transmitting to the American people and to the entire free world a renewed spirit of enlightenment and confidence and understanding. We can no longer afford to leave America's storehouse of potential growth so forlorn and untenanted. And while they're thinking only of the next election, we will continue to think of our future generations and how best to bequeath to them a legacy worthy of our most sanctified traditions. The American people, understandably, are becoming steeped in skepticism over an administration that seeks huge contributions from the rich and votes from the poor on the pretext of protecting each from the other. The party of Lincoln, our party, has a great heritage, and quite properly, we express pride in this heritage. However, we must not and we will not be content to bask idly in the glories of the past. Rather, we will act now with force and determination. Our priceless heritage will serve as an inspiration to solve the many social, economic, and philosophical problems that today trouble the American people. And we will, by spirit and by action, manifest our concern for the dignity and the self-respect, the equal opportunity, and the human rights of every American. We shall indeed exemplify our abiding respect for the heritage of the Republican Party by acting vigorously and forthrightly in the ever-living present. We will persevere in these efforts because we are adherents to the proven principles that have carried our country forward over the decades under the inspired doctrines enunciated by the founding fathers of our country. We will deliberate carefully, compassionately, intelligently, and realistically, and we will nominate the candidate who will best portray our true image to the American people, for the sake of not just our party, but for the sake of all the American people, for the benefit of this and future generations of Americans, and for the enduring consolation and trust of freedom-loving peoples throughout this very troubled world. Again, a thousand welcomes to all of you. Let's stand by as a united party and go on to victory in November. Thank you very much.
Ex-Mayor Christopher of San Francisco has just exercised another immutable law of politics, which is that no matter how deeply the party is divided, you denounce the opposition and you get applause. Ex-Mayor Christopher did, and there was applause. I don't know what significance politically this possibly can be, Howard, but I reported earlier that the present mayor, John Shelley, used to be a milk wagon driver, and before he entered politics, ex-Mayor Christopher was a man in the dairy business.